20 points per game, 7th in the league in scoring. Here's the league's 3rd leading scorer in Caitlin Clark. Spinning on Beckers. They go one-on-one, and Clark wins the matchup. Dallas now 0 of 8 from out there.
You love the swing to an open shot.
Clark on the drive, gets inside and lays it in.
Resilience around wanting to play in this league.
Clark steps back and drops the 2. Difficult shot from the mid-range there for Caitlin Clark. She's got 8 points. Tough shot for Arike Agumbawale.
The percentage of unassisted baskets for Arike are the lowest of her career. As Clark steps back and drills it.
Career had it knocked away. Stolen by Timpson. Clark fires. And it goes down!
We need to have a very serious and very direct conversation about what Caitlin Clark just accomplished against the Dallas Wings, because the historical milestone she reached in this game is genuinely staggering, and the circumstances under which she reached it, including teammates who could not convert the opportunities she created, and a coaching decision that removed her from the game while she was personally carrying Indiana on her back, make the achievement even more remarkable than the raw numbers alone suggest. Let us start with the record, because it deserves to be stated clearly and with its complete and permanent weight. Caitlin Clark recorded her 20th career game with 20 or more points and 10 or more assists. No other player in the entire history of the WNBA has more than 10 such games. Clark has doubled the previous record. She now holds a historical distinction that belongs entirely and exclusively to her, one she cannot share with anyone who came before her, because no one who came before her came remotely close to this threshold, and she is not done adding to it. Every player in this league who is voted ahead of her in the mid-season player ranking system, everyone who placed her 11th among guards, is now watching her rewrite records that no one else in this league's history has approached. The final score was Indiana 98, Dallas Wings 87. Indiana won. Clark finished with 29 points, 10 assists, and shot 11 of 18 from the field for a 61% efficiency rate. She went 2 of 8 from three-point range on a night when the long-range shot was not falling, and she still produced the kind of complete dominant performance that changes games and permanently changes record books. She had 1 turnover, while generating 10 assists and 29 points in a game where the players around her were collectively blowing layups at a rate that strains credibility without having witnessed it firsthand. Let us talk about the missed layups, because this number reframes everything about Clark's statistical production in this game and about what her true output looks like when evaluated honestly. Observers tracking carefully during this game counted approximately 10 missed layups that would have been Clark assists if they had been converted. 10 missed layups. Kelsey Mitchell missed 3 of them alone. Lexi Hall missed 1 with such force that it bounced off the backboard and traveled well toward half court. Sophie Cunningham missed 1. Michaela Timpson missed multiple. Aaliyah Boston, who has offered public commentary about MVP considerations for teammates in this league, was missing close-range shots that a player at her salary and experience level should be converting at a consistently high rate in professional basketball competition. If the players surrounding Clark had simply made their layups at any reasonable professional conversion rate, Clark would have finished this game with approximately 20 assists, a 20-point, 20-assist game in the history of the WNBA, in a game where she also scored 29 points. Instead, she finished with 10 assists and the record that no other player in this league's history has approached, while the players around her left 10 additional assists unrealized because they could not convert the opportunities she was generating at an elite and consistent rate. That context is not a minor footnote to the statistical summary. That context is the most important piece of analysis available for understanding what Clark does for this team every single game, and what this team costs her in statistical output through the collective failure to finish the plays she creates. Now let us address the coaching decision that is generating pointed and legitimate criticism, because what happened with Clark's substitution during the third quarter requires direct and honest examination without diplomatic softening. Clark scored 17 points in the third quarter alone, 17 points in 1 quarter of a professional basketball game. she was not doing this from a position of comfort or in a game that had been going Indiana's way. She was carrying the Indiana fever through the consequences of a dreadful first half, generating everything positive about Indiana's second-half performance with her individual playmaking, scoring, and competitive will. And with approximately 90 seconds remaining in the third quarter, Stephanie White substituted Clark out of the game. Not Kelsey Mitchell, not the player who was visibly struggling with her shot selection throughout the night. Clark, the player who had just scored 17 points in a single quarter and was the sole competitive engine, generating everything Indiana needed to turn this game in the right direction. She was removed while Mitchell, who finished the game 9 of 21 from the field and 1 of 7 from three-point range, remained on the floor. The observation being made loudly and with legitimate analytical foundation is that this substitution pattern appears designed to protect Kelsey Mitchell's consecutive 20-point game streak rather than to maximize Indiana's competitive performance in a game that had been uncomfortably close against a shorthanded opponent. Mitchell shot 21 times to accumulate her 23 points. The three-point shot was not falling. Multiple layups were missed. The efficiency of the performance was not what the scoring total suggests. And throughout all of it, Mitchell stayed on the floor while the player who was actively dominating was removed. The consecutive 20-point game streak Mitchell is maintaining has now started generating comparisons to situations in other leagues and other teams where individual milestones are preserved at the expense of optimal collective performance. Whether that comparison is fair is a discussion the basketball community is actively having. What is not a discussion is what the footage shows about which player was generating Indiana's competitive momentum in the third quarter and which player was asked to sit down before that quarter concluded. Clark herself demonstrated the kind of unselfishness throughout this game that should never be taken for granted or treated as an expectation that exists without acknowledgement. The highlights from the fourth quarter show Clark delivering passes to Mitchell in late-game situations that gave Mitchell the opportunity to keep her scoring streak alive rather than Clark pursuing the additional individual scoring she was clearly capable of generating on this specific night. Clark was actively facilitating for a teammate at the expense of her own statistical ceiling. That is what an excellent and genuinely team-oriented player does, and it deserves to be named clearly rather than assumed. Paige Bueckers had a strong individual performance for Dallas in this game. 29 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists. The contrast in statistical completeness between Bueckers' multi-dimensional contribution and Mitchell's single-dimensional scoring performance on difficult shooting efficiency is worth examining carefully in the context of the MVP conversation that has been circulating around this franchise. Bueckers was contributing across multiple areas of the game simultaneously, which is what genuinely elite players do, regardless of whether the ball is in their hands at any given moment. Clark had that kind of complete game, 29 points on 61% shooting, 10 assists generating nearly 30 points for teammates, 1 turnover, playmaking reads, and individual scoring sequences that the Wings had no reliable answer for throughout the second half, including backdoor passes, transition finishes, pull-up jumpers in the mid-range, and straight-line drives that put the defense in impossible defensive rotations. The first half of this game requires honest acknowledgement because it was not acceptable basketball from Indiana. The Fever scored 35 points while Dallas, missing Jessica Shepard and AZ Flulu, scored 37. A shorthanded Wings team was winning at halftime. The margin for error against a significantly depleted opponent should have been considerably more comfortable than what Indiana produced in the first 2 quarters. The collective underperformance of the opening half is part of the complete and accurate accounting of this game regardless of what the final score ultimately shows. What changed the competitive trajectory was Clark deciding in the third quarter that the first half situation was not acceptable and that she was personally going to alter it. 17 points in a single quarter. Plays that gave Indiana control. A performance that was sufficiently dominant to make the coaching staff's decision to remove her before the quarter concluded even more difficult to defend on purely competitive grounds. Ty Harris came off the bench and delivered 15 points on 5 of 5 from three-point range in the fourth quarter. That bench performance was genuine, meaningful, and significant for the final margin. When a bench contributor shoots 5 of 5 from 3 in closing minutes, victories become more comfortable than the competitive tension of earlier quarters suggested they would be. Harris deserves direct recognition for what she provided at that stage of the game. Aaliyah Boston finished with 16 points and 10 assists. The assists reflect genuine playmaking investment and represent a positive development in her facilitation of the offensive system. The missed close-range shots that were observable throughout this game reflect a player whose finishing near the basket has declined from what it was earlier in her professional career. For reasons that may include physical circumstances, the coaching system's tendency to position her further from the basket than her natural strength dictate, or some combination of both factors. Whatever the cause, the missed conversions directly and measurably cost Clark multiple assists and cost Indiana multiple scoring possessions that a player at Boston's experience and compensation level should be converting at professional rates. The record is now documented and permanent: 20 career games with 20 or more points and 10 or more assists in WNBA history. The previous high was 10. Clark has doubled it. She owns this record the way records belong to players who accomplish things that no one who came before them ever accomplished. She set this record against the Dallas Wings in a game where her teammates collectively missed approximately 10 layups that should have been additional assists. She set it after being removed from the game in the third quarter while scoring 17 points and personally rescuing Indiana from the consequences of a poor first half. She set it with 1 turnover while generating 10 assists despite the conversion failures surrounding her. Indiana now looks ahead to the Atlanta Dream in a game that carries its own specific significance for playoff positioning in the final stretch of this regular season. The team that Clark carried on her back through a mediocre first half and into a 9-point victory will need the consistent collective engagement across all 4 quarters that has been absent too often this season, if they intend to compete effectively with genuinely elite opposition when the stakes reach their highest point. But tonight belongs entirely to the record and to the performance that made it possible. Career games with 20-plus points and 10-plus assists in WNBA history. No other player has more than 10. The record belongs to Clark, and it will continue belonging to her because she is the only player in the history of this sport who has ever performed at this specific level of sustained completeness. The players who voted her 11th among guards in the league mid-season ranking should look at this record and explain the analytical framework that produces that result. The coaches who remove players from games while those players are scoring 17 points in a quarter in order to protect a teammate's statistical streak should understand what the full competitive picture of this franchise looks like when evaluated honestly. The league that consistently declines to credit her publicly for the commercial transformation she has generated should understand that the record books are doing the crediting with a permanence that no institutional communication strategy can diminish or revise. 20 games. The record: Indiana wins 98-87. The Atlanta Dream is next.